8-foot alien Gladiator mocked the human Marine until she fell to her knees, begging for mercy.
The arena of arrogance. The air smelled of sweat, metal, and blood. The roaring crowd of Zythalians, massive battle-hardened warriors, pounded their fists against the stone walls of the Colosseum, eager to see the tiny human get crushed. Captain Ryan Carter stood in the center of the arena, rolling his shoulders as he took in his surroundings. The sunlight burned down on the red sand, making the golden armor of the Zythalian warriors gleam like fire. His opponent stepped forward. She was a towering figure, 8 feet of muscle and menace. Her blue-tinted skin shimmered with war paint, and her 4 powerful arms flexed as she cracked her knuckles. Her long, dark hair was tied into a high braid, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes, filled with undeniable arrogance. This was Commander Varessa Kathon, champion of the Zythalian war clans. She looked down at Ryan and laughed, a deep, rich sound that echoed through the arena. They send a human. This is an insult. Her voice carried a natural authority, laced with amusement. I will make this quick little soldier. Try not to die too fast. Ryan smirked. Oh, don't worry. I like to take my time. The crowd erupted into cheers and laughter, entertained by his apparent foolishness. A Zythalian announcer raised a ceremonial blade into the air. Let the trial of strength begin. A massive war gong rang across the arena. Varessa lunged forward, moving far faster than anyone her size should. Ryan barely dodged as one of her 4 fists slammed into the ground where he had stood. The impact cracked the stone beneath it. Ryan didn't waste time admiring the destruction. He had fought bigger and stronger enemies before. Strength alone never won battles. He ducked and rolled to the side, grabbing a handful of arena sand and tossing it into Varessa's face. She snarled, momentarily blinded, and swung wildly. Ryan used the distraction to slide between her legs and land a sharp kick to the back of her knee. The giantess staggered. The crowd gasped. Varessa turned with fire in her eyes, wiping the sand from her face. She grinned, revealing sharp canines. Clever, but you cannot defeat me with tricks, human. Ryan shrugged. Good thing I brought more than tricks. She charged again, but this time Ryan didn't run. He sidestepped at the last second and grabbed onto one of her upper arms, using her momentum to twist her into a brutal throw. Her body hit the ground with a deafening TUD. The entire arena went silent. Ryan stood over Varessa, panting. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay calm, stay cocky. He pressed a boot lightly against her shoulder, just enough to make a statement. The great warrior had fallen. Varessa's eyes widened in disbelief. She stared up at the human who had just humiliated her in front of her people. And then, in the stunned silence, a realization dawned on her. In Zythalian warrior law, defeat in battle meant submission to the victor. Ryan had no idea what he had just done. Varessa gritted her teeth. She had mocked him, underestimated him. Now she was bound by honor to kneel. Slowly, painfully, she dropped to one knee. The crowd erupted into chaos. Ryan frowned. Why does this feel important? Varessa glared up at him, her voice like a growl. Because, human, you just won yourself a wife. Ryan stared at Varessa, trying to process her words. Wait, what? The arena was still in an uproar. Zythalian warriors shouted, some in laughter, others in shock. The announcer looked equally stunned, but he quickly recovered, raising his hands to address the crowd. The human has claimed victory. As per the ancient laws, the defeated must submit. Ryan turned back to Varessa. She was still kneeling, fists clenched, her expression a mix of humiliation and rage. This has to be a joke. He rubbed the back of his neck. You don't actually mean. Varessa shot up to her full height, towering over him again. I do not joke about honor, human. Her voice carried through the arena, silencing some of the murmuring. Ryan exhaled. This was a mess. A giant warrior princess-sized mess. He glanced at the council members seated in the high balcony above. Their faces were unreadable, but they were clearly observing every detail. This wasn't just about a fight. It was a political moment. Ryan sighed. All right, let's just take a step back. He gestured vaguely between them. There's gotta be a way out of this that doesn't involve me suddenly being married to a giant woman who wanted to break me in half 5 minutes ago. Varessa scowled. You mock our customs. Ryan held up his hands. No, not mocking. Just surprised. Back on Earth, we don't exactly do the whole defeated in battle means wedding bells thing. A nearby Zythalian warrior grinned. Sounds like a weak species. Ryan shot him a look. We do just fine, thanks. Varessa folded her arms, all 4 of them. There is no way out. A warrior must uphold their honor. I will not break my vow, no matter how much it disgusts me. Ryan blinked. Wow. Okay. Feeling the love already. One of the council members finally stood, an elderly Zythalian with deep scars running down his face. His voice was calm, but carried undeniable authority. The law is clear. Commander Varessa has been defeated in combat. She must submit to the human, or she will be seen as a dishonorable coward. Varessa's jaw tightened. Ryan groaned. Great. So if I say no, she's shamed forever. If I say yes, I'm stuck in a marriage I didn't sign up for. A new thought hit him. Wait, does this make me some kind of prince? Varessa clenched her fists. It makes you my problem. Ryan grinned. Oh, I'm gonna be such a problem. The elder council member raised his hand. The ceremony will begin at nightfall. The human and the commander shall be bound by blood. Ryan's grin dropped. Wait, what now? Varessa turned sharply on her heel. Come, human, if we are to be wed, I refuse to have you looking like a weakling before my people. Ryan groaned again, rubbing his temples as he followed her. I feel like I just got drafted into a war I wasn't even fighting. The crowd roared in excitement as they left the arena, already preparing for the strangest wedding their planet had ever seen. Ryan followed Varessa through the towering stone halls of the Zythalian stronghold. The walls were carved with ancient battle scenes, lit by flickering blue torches that cast eerie shadows. It felt less like a palace and more like a fortress built for war, which, given what he'd seen so far, made perfect sense. He sighed. So, where exactly are we going? Varessa didn't slow down. To prepare you for the ceremony, if you are to stand beside me, you will not do so looking like a fragile creature. Ryan frowned. Hey, I just took you down in a fight. Varessa whipped around, standing over him with her piercing golden eyes. That was luck. Do not mistake it for strength. Ryan smirked. You sound a little salty. Varessa let out a low growl but didn't argue. Instead, she turned and pushed open a heavy metal door. Inside was a massive chamber filled with alien weapons, armor, and battle-scarred training dummies. Several Zythalian warriors were already inside, sharpening blades and practicing combat drills. When they saw Ryan, a few of them exchanged amused glances. One particularly massive warrior, nearly 9 feet tall and covered in deep blue armor, stepped forward. He had scars crisscrossing his grayish-purple skin and a smirk that screamed trouble. So this is the human the commander is bound to. He chuckled. I expected something bigger. Ryan crossed his arms. Yeah, well, I expected less forehead, but here we are. The warriors burst into laughter, and even Varessa's lips twitched slightly. The massive warrior clapped Ryan on the back, nearly knocking the wind out of him. I like this one. He has spirit. He turned to Varessa. Shall we test him? Ryan immediately raised a hand. Define test before I agree to anything. Varessa gestured to a nearby rack of weapons. Choose one. Ryan looked over the selection. Swords with jagged edges, double-bladed staffs, spears taller than he was. Yeah, no way was he wielding any of these without embarrassing himself. Then he spotted something familiar. A pair of reinforced combat gloves, built for shock absorption and enhanced punching power. Now that he could work with, he grabbed them and slipped them on, flexing his fingers. All right, who's first? The massive warrior, still grinning, stepped forward. You'll do well, little human. Ryan exhaled and got into a stance. Let's find out. The sparring match was fast, brutal, and shockingly fun. The Zythalian warrior was strong, but Ryan was fast. He dodged heavy swings, landing sharp jabs where he could. The crowd of warriors cheered and roared, enjoying the fight far more than he expected. Even Varessa watched with her arms crossed, eyes narrowed in thought. After a solid 5 minutes, the warrior called for a stop. Enough. He has skill. He gave Ryan an approving nod. You might actually survive the wedding. Ryan wiped sweat from his brow. That's the goal. Varessa motioned for him to follow her again. You may not be as weak as I thought. Ryan grinned, careful, that almost sounded like a compliment. Varessa scoffed, but didn't deny it. As they left the training hall, Ryan was starting to realize something. Maybe, just maybe, this crazy wedding wasn't going to be the worst thing that ever happened to him. Ryan barely had time to catch his breath before Varessa led him deeper into the stronghold. He wasn't sure if the wedding preparation involved more combat training or something even weirder, but at this point, nothing would surprise him. They entered a massive ceremonial chamber. The high stone ceiling was covered in glowing symbols, and the floor was polished obsidian, reflecting the light of dozens of floating blue flames. At the center stood an ancient battle altar, its surface covered in intricate carvings of warriors locked in combat. Ryan raised an eyebrow. So, am I supposed to fight this altar or what? Varessa sighed. No, human. This is where you will take the warrior's vow. Ryan crossed his arms. I feel like you keep introducing me to new alien traditions and conveniently leaving out the details. Varessa's golden eyes glowed slightly as she stepped closer. Because your earthborn mind would panic if I told you everything at once. Ryan smirked. You say that like I'm not already panicking. Before Varessa could respond, an elder Zythalian entered the chamber. She was tall, draped in dark ceremonial robes, and carried a staff decorated with the fangs of some alien beast. Her piercing silver eyes locked onto Ryan. The human stands before the altar of warriors, she said in a deep, commanding voice. Does he know what is required? Ryan shot Varessa a glance. I don't know, does he? Varessa exhaled slowly. You must prove that you are worthy to stand beside me. To do so, you will face the trial of honor. Ryan's shoulders tensed. Okay, gotta ask. What happens if I fail? The elder smiled in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. Then the wedding will be canceled, and your life may be forfeit. Ryan blinked. Great, love the stakes here. Varessa stepped forward. The trial will test your courage, intelligence, and skill in battle. If you succeed, no one in my clan will challenge our union. Ryan rolled his shoulders. Fine, let's do this. The elder slammed her staff into the ground. The room rumbled, and a large section of the floor descended into darkness. A moment later, it rose back up, revealing a massive combat arena beneath the altar. Ryan whistled. Okay, I gotta admit, that's cool. The elder motioned toward the arena. Step forward, human. Face your trial. Ryan took a deep breath and jumped down. The moment his feet hit the ground, the walls around him shifted, and 3 towering Zythalian warriors stepped out from the shadows. Each of them carried a different weapon. One with a massive axe, another with twin blades, and the third with a spear crackling with energy. Ryan raised his hands. Hold on. 3 against 1. That hardly seems fair. Varessa looked down at him from above. You are my mate. If you cannot handle 3 warriors, you do not deserve me. Ryan chuckled dryly. So much pressure in this relationship. The warriors charged. Ryan dodged the axe swing, rolling to the side just in time to avoid the twin blades slashing toward him. His mind worked fast. He was smaller, faster, and had to use that to his advantage. He ducked under a spear thrust and grabbed a loose piece of stone from the ground. With a well-aimed throw, he struck the spear-wielding warrior in the knee, making him stumble. The moment of distraction was all Ryan needed. He jumped onto the warrior's back, using him as a launch pad to leap over the axe-wielding brute. Spinning midair, he kicked the warrior in the head, sending him crashing into the twin-blade fighter. The crowd roared in approval. Ryan landed with a smirk. Still think I'm weak? Varessa watched in silence, her golden eyes glowing with something he couldn't quite read. The elder slammed her staff again. Enough. The trial is complete. Ryan exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. So, did I pass? The elder studied him before nodding. The human has proven his worth. Varessa stepped forward and extended her hand toward him. For the first time, her expression softened slightly. "You fought well, Ryan. Perhaps you truly are worthy." Ryan grinned, taking her hand. "Took you long enough to admit it." The wedding was officially on. The trial was over. Ryan had won. The crowd of Zythalians stood in silence for a moment before erupting into cheers and stomps that shook the ground. He wasn't sure if they were impressed or just relieved they wouldn't have to execute him. Either way, he'd take it. Varessa stood at the edge of the arena, watching him with a gaze that was no longer just skeptical, but something else, something softer. She extended a hand toward him. "Come, human, the wedding begins." Ryan took her hand, letting her pull him up from the combat pit. His legs were sore, his ribs ached from dodging too many hits, but his mind was racing. "So when you say wedding, should I be worried?" Varessa smirked. "Only if your heart is weak." Ryan sighed. "Great, because I haven't had enough near-death experiences today." The ceremonial chamber transformed within minutes. The altar of warriors was now covered in golden fabrics, and the once dark walls glowed with shifting patterns of light, symbols that pulsed with energy. A dozen Zethalian elders gathered in a circle, each one carrying a curved ceremonial dagger. Ryan tensed. "Okay, Varessa, I'm gonna need an explanation before someone starts stabbing." Varessa stepped forward, her long silver hair catching the light. "A warrior's bond is sealed with blood and fire." Ryan blinked. "Oh, well, that sounds totally normal and not terrifying." Varessa lifted her wrist, allowing one of the elders to make a small, precise cut along her palm. The elder then turned to Ryan, holding up the dagger expectantly. Ryan hesitated. He'd survived the arena, but this felt different. This wasn't about proving his strength. It was about proving his commitment. He glanced at Varessa. Her golden eyes studied him, waiting. Ryan took the dagger and made a shallow cut across his own palm. It stung, but he barely flinched. The elder pressed Varessa's hand to his, their blood mixing. A low hum filled the room as the symbols on the walls glowed brighter. A rush of heat spread through Ryan's body, as if something ancient and powerful had just bound him to her in a way he couldn't explain. Varessa watched him closely, her usual smirk replaced by something more serious. "You are mine now, Ryan Steele." Ryan grinned, squeezing her hand. "Yeah, well, you're mine too, Varessa." The crowd cheered, stamping their feet in approval. Just as Ryan was beginning to relax, a deep booming voice echoed through the chamber. "Unacceptable." The room fell silent. From the shadows, a towering Zythalian warrior stepped forward. He was even taller than Varessa, 8.5 feet of pure muscle, draped in dark battle armor. His silver hair was braided, and his golden eyes burned with fury. Varessa stiffened. "General Cortal." Ryan glanced at her. "Friend of yours." Varessa's expression darkened. "He was once my betrothed." Ryan's stomach dropped. Cortal stomped forward, glaring down at Ryan. "You insult our traditions by bonding with a human. I challenge this union." Ryan sighed. "Of course you do." The elder who had performed the ceremony hesitated, then turned to Varessa. "He has the right to challenge. The decision is yours." Ryan looked at her. "Tell me there's a way out of this." Varessa exhaled slowly. "There is only one way." Ryan nodded. "Yeah, let me guess. I have to fight him." Varessa turned toward Cortal, her expression cold and unwavering. "No." Cortal narrowed his eyes. "Then how will you defend your choice?" Varessa's golden eyes locked onto him. "I will fight you myself." The chamber fell silent. Ryan's eyes widened as Varessa stepped forward, her golden gaze locked on Cortal. Her shoulders squared, and her hand moved to the hilt of her blade. "You challenge my right to choose." Her voice was steady, filled with the quiet thunder of a true warrior. "Then I will fight for my choice." Cortal's expression hardened. "You would stain your honor for this human." Varessa lifted her chin. "No, Cortal, you stain your own by questioning my will." Ryan took a step closer. "Okay, I appreciate the whole defend my honor thing, but do I get a say in this? Maybe I should fight him instead." Varessa didn't look at him. This is not your fight." Ryan sighed. "Yeah, see, that's the problem. It kinda is." But she had already drawn her weapon. The elders stepped aside as the challenge was accepted. The room shifted, and warriors formed a circle around them. The air was thick with tension. Cortal drew his own blade, a massive curved weapon that looked more like a piece of a battleship than something a person should carry. His muscles tensed beneath his dark armor. Ryan had seen Varessa fight before, but this felt different. This wasn't a test or a tradition. This was personal. The moment the elder gave the signal, Cortal lunged forward. Varessa sidestepped in a blur of movement, her silver hair flowing behind her as she ducked low and struck for his ribs. Cortal blocked just in time, his blade crashing against hers with a sound like thunder. Sparks flew. The impact sent shockwaves through the chamber. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. She was fast, but Cortal was powerful. The duel was brutal. Cortal's strikes were heavy, calculated, meant to break her defenses. Varessa moved like a dancer, weaving between his attacks, striking when she could, but never landing a decisive blow. Then, a mistake. Cortal swung wide, and Varessa dodged, but he was waiting for that. With a sudden shift, he slammed his shoulder into her midsection, sending her crashing to the ground. Ryan's heart jumped into his throat. Varessa. She rolled away just in time to avoid the downward slash of Cortal's blade, but she was winded, her movements slightly slower than before. Cortal sneered. Yield. Varessa pushed to her feet, gripping her sword tighter. Never. Ryan clenched his fists. He had to do something. He couldn't just watch her fight alone. Then, an idea hit him. Ryan cupped his hands around his mouth. "Hey, Cortal." The warrior's gaze flicked to him, just for a split second. That was enough. Varessa moved like lightning, twisting around Cortal's momentary distraction and delivering a brutal kick to the back of his knee. He staggered, his balance thrown off. She didn't hesitate. With a fluid motion, she brought the hilt of her sword up and struck him hard across the jaw. Cortal stumbled backward, his blade slipped from his grasp, clattering against the stone floor. Varessa didn't give him a chance to recover. She drove her foot against his chest, forcing him down onto his knees. The chamber was deathly quiet. Varessa stood over him, breathing hard, blade hovering near his throat. Cortal gritted his teeth. "Finish it." Varessa's grip tightened, but then she slowly lowered her weapon. "No." Cortal's eyes widened. "You show mercy." She stepped back. "No, I show you your place." For a long moment, Cortal knelt there, processing what had just happened. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. "The bond stands." The chamber erupted in cheers. Ryan exhaled in relief, stepping forward. "Not gonna lie, I thought that was going to end badly." Varessa turned to him, sweat glistening on her skin, her golden eyes still burning with adrenaline. "It would have, if you had interfered more." Ryan grinned. "So what you're saying is, I helped." Varessa's lips quirked into a small smile. "A little." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, wife, what now?" Varessa paused. Then, with a smirk, she leaned in close and whispered, "Now we feast." The grand hall roared with life. Warriors pounded their fists on the long stone tables, shouting in celebration. Massive torches lined the walls, their golden flames flickering against the towering ceilings. The scent of roasted meats, exotic spices, and fermented drinks filled the air. Ryan sat beside Varessa at the head of the feast table, looking down at the massive platter placed in front of him. The centerpiece? A roasted beast the size of a motorcycle, its scales still gleaming. Ryan blinked. "I think it's still looking at me." Varessa chuckled, taking a sharp knife and slicing off a generous piece. "It is at Kyrax boar, a warrior's meal." She handed him a chunk of the meat. "Eat. You fought well today." Ryan took a hesitant bite. It was surprisingly good, like a mix between steak and something faintly spicy. Around them, the warriors of her clan celebrated. Massive goblets of deep purple wine were passed around, and warriors laughed, sharing stories of past battles. Cortal, still rubbing his bruised jaw, sat across from Ryan. Despite his loss, he now regarded Ryan with grudging respect. "Human," Cortal rumbled, lifting his goblet. "You are more cunning than I expected. I should have known better than to turn my back on a soldier." Ryan smirked, raising his own drink. "And I should have known better than to bet against an 8-foot warrior queen." He nodded toward Varessa. She raised a brow, but allowed herself a small smile. As the feast continued, an elder warrior stood, tapping the hilt of his blade against the table. "We honor this victory, but there is one final challenge left." The room fell silent. Ryan frowned, swallowing his last bite. "Wait, final challenge." Varessa turned to him, amusement glinting in her golden eyes. "Do not worry, it is a tradition." Ryan narrowed his eyes. "You keep saying that, and every time, it almost gets me killed." The elder warrior pointed to a massive metal drinking horn placed at the center of the table. It was the size of Ryan's torso. Ryan's stomach sank. "Let me guess. Drinking contest." Cortal chuckled. "Not just any drink. The fire brew. A single sip can make a weaker warrior collapse." Ryan exhaled. "Of course it can." Varessa leaned in slightly. "You may refuse. No one will think less of you." Ryan glanced around. Every warrior in the room was watching him. Refusing wouldn't ruin his standing, but after everything, he couldn't back down now. Ryan stood, rolling his shoulders. "All right, let's do this." The warriors erupted in cheers. The elder lifted the massive horn, filling it to the brim with a glowing amber liquid that sizzled and steamed as it was poured. The scent alone burned Ryan's nose. This was a mistake. The horn was placed before him. Ryan picked it up, hefting its ridiculous weight, and took a deep breath, bottoms up. He drank. Fire, pure fire. The liquid burned its way down his throat, exploding in his chest like a star-going supernova. His entire body tensed. For a brief moment, his vision blurred. He heard warriors cheering, laughing, some even placing bets on whether he'd survive. Then the fire faded, leaving behind a shocking warmth and an almost pleasant buzz. Ryan slammed the horn down, exhaling sharply. Not bad. The room went silent for a beat, then erupted into deafening cheers. Warriors clapped him on the back, howling in approval. Even Cortal looked impressed. Varessa smirked, crossing her arms. "You continue to surprise me, human." Ryan groaned, rubbing his forehead. "You say that like I'm not going to regret this in the morning." Varessa chuckled, leaning closer. "Perhaps I will take care of you then." Ryan blinked, heat rising to his face, but before he could respond, another warrior stood. "A toast," the warrior bellowed. "To Ryan, the human who dared." "To Ryan," the warriors roared, slamming their goblets against the table. Ryan exhaled, shaking his head with a grin. He wasn't sure how, but he was actually starting to feel at home here. The celebration had gone deep into the night. The warriors drank, laughed, and sparred well past reason. Eventually, the grand hall grew quieter as exhaustion took its toll. One by one, the clan members left, until only a few remained. Ryan sat near the dying embers of the great fire, his head spinning slightly from the fire brew. He had no idea how he was still conscious. Probably pure stubbornness. Varessa sat beside him, her golden eyes watching the flames. She looked different in the firelight, softer, less like the unstoppable warrior queen, and more like a woman carrying the weight of a whole world on her shoulders. "You fought well today," she said, her voice quieter than usual. Ryan smirked. "You say that like you're surprised." Varessa gave a small laugh, not surprised, but impressed. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Ryan glanced at her. "What happens now?" Varessa turned her gaze to him, studying his face. "You have earned their respect. You have proven your strength, your cleverness." She paused. "But do you still wish to leave?" Ryan blinked. He hadn't thought about that in hours, maybe even days. At first, his only goal had been survival, then proving himself, then making sure he didn't get crushed in some ridiculous challenge. But now, he looked at Varessa, at the warriors who had cheered for him, at the firelit hall that had somehow begun to feel familiar. Did he want to leave? Varessa shifted slightly. I will not force you to stay, Ryan. I swore an oath to give you freedom of choice, but She hesitated, gripping the edge of the stone bench. I find that I do not wish to see you go. Ryan swallowed. He had fought entire squads of enemy soldiers, survived impossible battles, and outwitted an 8-foot gladiator in front of her entire clan. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of Varessa looking vulnerable. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, that makes 2 of us. Varessa's eyes widened slightly. You mean? Ryan nodded. I don't think I want to leave. At least, not yet. He smirked. Gotta keep you on your toes, after all. Varessa's lips curled into a smile, and for the first time, she reached out, placing a hand on his. Her touch was warm, strong, and steady. Then stay, she said softly. As my partner, as my equal. Ryan's chest tightened. Equal, not a prisoner, not just a challenger, but her partner. He squeezed her hand. Yeah, I think I'd like that. The flames flickered, casting their shadows against the walls. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly over the alien sky, and for the first time since crashing into this world, Ryan didn't feel lost anymore.